guys, morning. Welcome to the Unrivaled Potential Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Pomeroy, here with a special guest today. We've got Alan Schroeder, and I've known Alan now for, Alan, what's it been? It's been
a couple months at least.
Yeah, it's 3 or 4.
Yeah.
I got to meet and really got to see you in a, I don't know, I don't think there's probably a better light to meet anyone than how we met in a prayer meeting like that, right?
Yep. Right.
I mean, that's just been really cool. What a personal way to meet someone and start respecting them and build a friendship, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, it's nice to know the struggles everybody goes through, because sometimes you're going through the same struggles, and so or you've gone through them in the past. You can always relate to what they're saying. Yeah.
Well, I think especially as younger men too, that and I'm sure it's the same as you get older. You look up. You put people on a pedestal that are 10, 13, 20 years, 30 years, whatever older than you put them up there like this. Especially for me as a meeting godly men, I'm like, man, how did they get to that point? Even talking to Andrew, and he spends all that time in prayer, and I'm just sitting there. I'm still at the age going like, I can't think of anything worse than sitting and praying for an hour. Like, I know the idea behind it, but I'm still can't wrap my head around it.
Yeah.
And so it's nice when you start relating to people that you go, oh yeah, they're human too, right?
Yeah. And I did, I never started that way. Patty and I, my wife, Patty and I were saved at a Billy Graham crusade. We were living in Boise, Idaho at the time. And we were saved when we were like, I don't know, what were we, probably 24 years old, And I'd always had some kind of relationship with the Lord, but I never had that great a relationship, that close. And, and it kind of blossomed a little bit after that, but then we fell back into the world a little bit,
Oh, yeah.
And it wasn't until later on in life that I actually developed what I call a great relationship with God. And I always asked God for leading, and I always asked Him for big decisions. When we bought some property or whatever, I'd always wait a little bit and did I feel comfortable with it, or was I at ease with it, And when He put me at peace with it, it's like, no, let's go for it, Or I'd ask Him, what's the price we should offer,
Right.
And He would always give me a price. And sometimes the realtor said, no way are they going to take that price, but they did. Yeah.
Wow.
And so it was kind of neat. But it was not until I was about I'd say 50 years old that I developed a more intimate relationship with Him, and it was so awesome at times. Like, I did a lot of traveling. We did a lot of traveling in our business at that point.
Yeah.
And I would literally go to drive, maybe I'd have to do a 3-hour drive or whatever to get somewhere. And in that 3 hours, I would have this conversation with the Lord the whole time, and He was kind of like mentoring me and teaching me and explaining things to me. And I would be asking questions, and I would get to the destination, and it's like, I don't actually remember driving here. Did I stop at that stop sign or that stoplight I was supposed to, and whatever, So that was a whole new experience for me that I'd never been through. But I'll tell you, it was like awesome.
Yeah. I have a similar story. It was actually in Idaho too for me when I been raised in the church, but it didn't really mean anything until I was just turned 24.
Yep.
And but have you ever been to northern Idaho?
Some, not as much. That's probably one regret we have. That when we lived in Boise, we should have gone more to Coeur d'Alene and so forth.
Oh yeah. So there's a little town just south of Coeur d'Alene called St. Mary's.
Right.
And that's where we lived for 5 years, and that was a pretty amazing time in my life. It's where I found God in a powerful way, and then for several years followed Him, and then I slipped off too for a little bit and went back into some different ways.
Yeah.
But Alan, it sounds like we've only known each other for a little bit, but it sounds like you've had a pretty amazing life, and you worked for some people, and then you went off and started your own your own thing from scratch. What was that like for you? Start listeners off and kind of what that journey was.
Yeah, at the time we had moved. We lived in Boise, and then we moved back to Denver. Um, and I was working for what they call a fundraising company that works with schools, helps school groups and groups outside of school raise money. And mainly we did product fundraising, which we handled everything from like wrapping paper to so forth. And then finally evolved into handling frozen foods like cookie dough and cheesecakes and stuff like that. But anyway, I was working for this company, and they were doing real well, but they were growing too fast. And so they had looked for some outside sources of income, and they met up with these guys in North Carolina that actually did hospital fundraising, big stuff, you know. And so that was turning out to be great. But what happened was, that was like in January of one year. Well, in the August of that year, for some reason, I don't know what the story was, but those guys decided, no, we really don't want to do this. And so they pulled all the funding. And this was a company that had about, at that time, we were up to about 40 to 50 reps, you know. And so, of course, the owner of the company, he's like panicking. He's like, what am I going to do? I don't have the cash flow and everything to do all this. And so he met up with a gal in Detroit that had her own fundraising company, about like $5 million a year company. And so she ended up basically buying him out. And so we ended up working for that. Well, what we didn't know at the time was that she was going through a divorce, and she literally was draining the corporation dry.
Oh, wow.
And so it worked for a couple of years, but then all of a sudden that second year in the springtime, the commission checks stopped. You know, it's like, okay, something's up. And sure enough, she was going into bankruptcy at that point. And so
you were getting paid based off of sales?
Basically commissions. And so Patty and I are like, so what are we going to do? You know, and then we got thinking about it a little bit, and it's like, well, we've got a customer base. We've got all these customers we've called on. And why don't we try starting our own company? Well, you have to realize that back then, there was no such thing as searching on the internet for companies, you know. Right. So we had to resource all these companies down. And sometimes it was like looking on a package, and it's like, Giftco. Okay, so who is Giftco and where are they, you know? And so we had to research all this. And with the Lord's help, we ended up finding one main supplier, and he led us to a lot of the other suppliers, and we kind of started from there. And it was, you know, it was like really touch and go because we didn't have any financial resources at that point. We'd just gone through a couple years earlier. We'd gone through it. We couldn't sell our house in Boise, but we moved back to Denver, and so we'd gone through a foreclosure with that. And it was a pretty tough time. And so I got some odd jobs to help bring in some income while we did it. Luckily, we got some dating from our suppliers, so that we had time for the invoices from the customers to come in before we had to pay for the products. So that was a savior in itself. And but we struggled, and we lived very conservatively, very meagerly the first couple of years. But then after that, it kind of caught on, and we kept, and again, we were saving our money, so it kept getting better and better. And probably about 5 years into it, we were to the point where it really wasn't that much of a problem anymore.
Yeah.
You know?
Was there a lot of fear? Did you feel like, you know, when I started this company, I didn't really have a lot of choices. And I had some fears, obviously, but I think I've had more as it's grown, just because it's so unknown to me. Like the beginning stage was easy. It sounds like you were in that world, and so there was some new hurdles to go over. But did you have some fear when you and Patty went off and?
Well, yeah. And the problem was we didn't really know anybody that ran a business.
Right.
So we didn't have anybody to go to advice to about how do you do this, how do you do that. So we had to discover all of those things. You know? And of course, you know. Naturally, you make mistakes. You don't know, you know, and I probably did, you know, and we were so conservative and stuff like that, and I wanted to know where the money was always going. So I actually probably in the first stages we we started as a sole proprietorship, I actually filled out the tax returns for the first 3 or 4 years, you know. And if you ask me where did all the money go, I knew exactly where it went, you know, because I had to deal with all of that, and I had to know, you know, how are we making this work? But as far as doing other things like working with customers and all that, that was kind of like a new thing to me, and so I had to get used to all that, and I had to get used to one of the biggest things, of course, when you start a business is learning to organize your time and learning to discipline yourself. You know that there's nobody there to tell you, you know, you have to do this or you have to, you know, do this on time and you have to go to work, you know, and you have to do whatever it takes to make it work, you know. And
so that was time
struggle.
blocking.
Yeah.
I read that book by Gary Keller called the One Thing, and it's just all about time blocking, and that's been life changing.
Yeah. The one good thing is we had a lot of support from family and friends, so that helped a lot.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So in tough times when we were like way over our heads as far as what we needed to do or whatever, we could count on some of the family and friends coming in and helping for a little bit and getting us through that and all that. So, and just the mental support, you know, and as you know, when you're starting out a business, it takes a toll on you from a mental stress standpoint because you're thinking of all these. You know, you're not only thinking about all the things that could go right, but you're thinking about all the things that could go wrong, you know?
Yeah.
And you have to learn to train yourself to push through those.
How did you, obviously it's a different day and age now, right? So we can just type in anything and find it. How did you find your, you know, obviously in that moment of time, something would come up and you're like, how do we get through this season? How do I figure out that solution? Did you find some solutions through like reading books or listening to the radio guys, or just kind of like trial and error? What was like, what got you through your? It
was a lot of trial and error. There were some books that I had read before on, you know, success and how to I guess train yourself to have a vision and to you know, to go for it and so forth. But so those things all helped. I probably can't identify one book that I read or whatever, but I think it was a combination of things. And one thing I've always had is a very positive attitude. And what was interesting was I went through high school and got fairly good grades. I went through college, got pretty good grades. But one semester I had these really tough classes, and I didn't think I'd ever get through that semester because every class required a tremendous amount of time. It's like, how in the world am I going to come up with all the time to do all the studying and everything else? And what was funny was that was the semester I got straight A's at college. And that made an impact on me because I realized that I could do it if I put my mind to it,
right?
You know, and set my goal, and it made me have more confidence in myself that, hey, if nothing else, maybe I'm not the smartest person in the world, you know, and maybe I don't know how to do everything correctly all the time, but the key is I can work, and I can work harder than most people.
Right.
And that was one of the keys to helping us get our business off the ground. Was I really worked.
Yeah. And there's no, I mean, I think especially on social media now, people watch somebody got famous from one video, right? And sometimes there's a great story of how they worked hard to get to that point and they were consistent. Sometimes it happens accidentally.
Right.
And we both know that that's the exception to the rule. I think the best thing that anyone can ever do is have that ability to just work hard, because it's a grind for a long time. I mean, the average is 3 to 5 years to finally get a business off the ground. And what was the vision? Did you have a big goal? I am a very creative person in that sense of a visionary, right, in our company role, right? So I look at massive, Right, and that's kind of where I'm going. I'll try to get to, and that's what I'm pushing for. Did you have a goal when you started this thing with Patty?
We had a goal, but honestly, our vision wasn't that big. Okay, we just wanted to have a nice lifestyle, and we wanted to have some extra money. So we started out with that goal. You know, what's it going to take to get to there? You know, and what was interesting is every year I've always been kind of a goal setter. So I would always set a goal for myself. It's like, okay, so how much are we going to increase this year? And it was funny because some years I'd set the goal, and we always had a season where probably about the 1st of May or so, you knew where you were pretty well going to be throughout the year. Okay, and so I would always set that goal, and sometimes by the 1st of May, it's like, oh yeah, looks like we're going to reach it. But there were other years it's like, I have no idea where this is going to come from, you know. And what was interesting was, again, that relationship with the Lord. I finally got to the point where I did what I could do, and I finally said, Lord, I don't know how this is going to happen. I'm going to leave it up to you. And I can tell you time and time again that business came from places I never thought it would come from. All of a sudden, old customers we've been hounding for 3 years to do something again, all of a sudden they call and say, oh yeah, we want to do something, you know. Or we get a referral from a customer, you know, just out of the blue that we didn't even know they existed, you know. And all of a sudden, by the start of fall, we would be at that goal where we had set. And sometimes we'd be even above it, you know. But I could, you know, again, I don't take any credit for getting to those goals other than doing the work that's needed. You know, there were times when God was carrying us.
Yeah.
You know, He made it come through.
I've definitely seen those moments
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
During these beginning years of grinding with your business at that time, Alan, did you have kids? Were you guys, how old were they?
We, when we started, Stephen was like, what was he, 2 years old? Yeah, 2 years old. Cassie wasn't born yet. They're 5 years apart. So when we started, it was really funny. Stephen learned to count by helping us in our business. So,
okay.
So in the evening, we would have to sort out this product and all this stuff and count a certain number and whatever to put it in the package or whatever. So I would have Steve would be watching us, and then I'd have him start, like, Stephen, can you count out 6 for me? You know? And so he would sit there and somehow figure out how to do 6, you know. And then, you know, a little while later, all of a sudden he was like up to 12, you know. And it wasn't sinking into me what was going on in his mind of how he was figuring that out, you know. I mean, he could count to I think like 10 at that point or 12 at that point, but he was figuring out even numbers beyond that. But I asked him, we were sitting in bed one time, and I asked Stephen, I said, and I don't know what caused me to ask it, but I'm like, Stephen, what is 2 times 3? And he'd sit there for a little bit. He goes, 6. And I goes, that must be a fluke. Stephen, what is 3 times 4? And again, he'd sit there, and you could see his mind turning. All of a sudden, he'd go, 12. And that's how he started out and learned how to be so good in math, was helping us in our business.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we've always, from day one, we always had our kids involved in our business. And that was, I think, something very great from their foundation, because it taught them to work and it taught them to take ownership in what we were doing. And we got to spend that special time with them all the time.
It stopped any resentment.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was a lot of fear when I started mine, and I've talked to several others too of how the grind is going to affect their family. And if you're working 100 hours that week, are your children going to resent you,
Yeah.
right? Or your wife too, right? Because it's a very difficult thing for all of you. And it sounds like you found a way to fix that. I've got my youngest daughter working with me now, and I just absolutely love it, you know.
Yeah.
But because there was times I felt guilty, you know. And, I mean, I'd come home at 2, 3 in the morning, and you work 120 hours in a week, and there's not much time for anyone else.
Yeah.
And sitting there battling, like, okay, how do I do this? Do I have to do this, or do I not have to? Am I doing this because this makes me feel better,
Yeah.
or I just work because I'm good at it, right? And,
Right.
But there are seasons of grinding, you know, that it seems like it's worth it to build
Yeah.
it. You know.
Yeah, you know, and of course we did a lot of traveling, you know, during your busy season and stuff like that. So it was really hard to get to deal with that, you know, being away from the family, being away from the kids, and so I'd have to deal with that all the time. And you know, and Stephen, when he got old enough, you know, he had football. He wanted to do youth football, you know, and I couldn't be there for the practices and all that stuff very often, so it was really difficult. But we did one blessing we did have is that during the summertime we had about 3 months there. That was our unbusy season, and we got to take a lot of time off, and we got to do a lot of traveling with the kids and stuff like that. So that was really cool. And if you ask them now, they don't remember the times that I was gone. They remember all of those times that we spent traveling together. So that was really, really cool.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome, man. It's really great to know too, because I still battle with that now. We're only 2.5 years into this thing, and there's been times when I've been 2-3 months away from the kids, right?
Yeah.
And I worry, like, is it worth it? You know, I thought a lot. You know?
Right.
You know, but
yeah, and family's always important. The other thing that I think was great was we had the kids working for us, and so we started paying them, and we didn't pay them a tremendous wage because we wanted them to, you know, not get a lot for nothing. You know,
right.
We wanted to pay them an equitable wage, but we started paying them, and through that whole process, we also taught them to manage their money. They got to earn their money, but they got to also spend it. And a prime example was when what was it? The PS2s or whatever came out. Yeah. And so Stephen, you know, all his friends had a PS2, so he wanted one, you know. And we told Stephen, it's like, no, we're not going to buy it for you, but you can earn the money to get it. And sure enough, he earned the money to get it. And because of the fact that he paid for it, he took care of it.
Yeah.
Whereas all of his other friends, the parents had bought the PS2 for them. And of course, it wasn't long, and they had totally trashed it, you know. And they were asking Stephen if they could borrow his, you know. And Stephen's like, no, you're not going to borrow mine.
Yeah.
You know, I paid for that.
That's expensive. Yeah, exactly.
So it was really neat to see that, and that set in the kids the understanding of how to earn money and manage money, and to realize that no, you don't get something for nothing.
Yeah, that's what I'm excited to start doing. We're getting her set up with a bank account. I mean, there's also the tax benefits, right? Paying your children, right? Was it $14,600 a year now is what it is, and that's tax free. And so there's those, you know, you might as well take it, you know, every tax write-off you can when you start a business or running it.
Yep.
Yeah, that's awesome, Alan, because it's a big fight of mine, and I know it's a huge battle for a lot of people that. Sometimes business owners aren't the greatest at balancing things, right? Because you get so focused on one goal, and then you forget everything else that's going on in life.
Right.
And it sounds like the business that you created has now become, I'd say, multi-generational, right? Is it your son is?
Our son and daughter in law took it over, and they ran it for about 6 years until COVID hit. And then when COVID hit, it created a nightmare in the industry, and because all the suppliers, you know, we were dealing with like school closures and stuff like that. So schools we had booked all of a sudden they weren't in session, so we couldn't even do the fundraising program, and we were always having to do everything ahead. Well, the suppliers also had to do everything ahead, just like our cheesecake supplier, they were making cheesecakes clear back in July to deliver in September, because there's no way they can make that many in September to ship them all,
Right.
So they'd have to make them, put them in cold storage, and then ship them. And so they got burnt that year. I don't know how many cheesecakes, but it was like hundreds of thousands of cheesecakes that they had to eat, And so after that year was over, they're like, no, I don't think we want to be in fundraising anymore. We'll do all the other food service stuff, And
All those factory workers probably gained a couple $100 pounds.
Yeah.
All those cheesecakes they had to eat.
Right. Yeah, we can't pay you, but you can have all the cheesecakes you want. Yeah.
Here's your shares of the company this year.
right. And so anyway, the suppliers went through this big turmoil, and so it became, after that, really difficult. And we went through again, and we went through. It wasn't just the first year; it was like the second year. They still were playing real leery and all that, and so our lead times on product, instead of getting product in like maybe 2 or 3 weeks, we had to wait like 6 or 7 weeks. Well, when you're dealing with a delivery window, our main delivery, we delivered 80% of our product in like 10 weeks. So you can't, that doesn't work, And so we went through those struggles and stuff, and finally got to the point where Steve and Claire said, no, we can't handle the stress. And so they ended up selling the corporation to another competitor of ours. Yeah.
That brings something else to mind too. Was there, when your kids got older, 17, 18 years old, I think a lot of business owners expect their children to take over the company, but it sounds like Stephen went off on his own way and got some degrees and stuff. Was that from your support, or was that just you allowing him to do whatever he wanted, or was his plan to go do this and then come back to running this company of yours?
He actually went to School of Mines and got a petroleum engineering degree and worked in petroleum industry for about 3 years. Well, that was when the petroleum industry all of a sudden had a downturn. And so the company, he actually worked for a Canadian company, and they were trying to take care of their employees, and they were like continuing to pay all these employees, and so they were running through cash, millions of cash every month, and they finally got to the point where they couldn't do it anymore, and so they ended up having to sell out to another company. So therefore the workforce got consolidated, and because he wasn't as had been there as long as some of the other employees, he ended up getting laid off. And but he had originally worked in North Dakota and then moved down to Denver area, and that was when they approached us. And they didn't. The other thing they didn't really like was they were starting to have kids, so they didn't really like the traveling. Stephen would be gone for like maybe 5 or 10 days at a time. He'd be out in the field, and Stephen and Claire both didn't really like that. So that's when they approached us, and we were thinking about retiring at that point, And it's like, so what are we going to do with the corporation? And so they came up with the idea, hey, how about we take it over and go from there?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, but at that was when they didn't want to do that at 18, going to college. Were you disappointed that they didn't want to be part of the business at the time, or was there no thoughts of sharing it at that moment?
I can't say we were disappointed, because I saw that their skills and abilities were far beyond what the corporation required, our business required.
Right. Right.
And they it's like both of them. I have no idea where they got all of their smarts from. It wasn't from Patty and I. It'll skip at least one generation.
Patty's really smart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we cheered them on. Whatever they wanted to do, that we were glad that they did it.
Well, that's great. I meet so many who've known them several years of father-son or father-daughter things, and the kids just get burned out that happens sometimes, or because there's so much pressure
Right.
that you got to take this over, and I've created this for you, and sometimes it's just not in the cards, or sometimes it's because there's so much pressure, the kids don't want to fail their parents, right? Because
Right.
they're good kids, and then they go, boy, this is just not worth it. I want to go do something else, right?
Yeah.
And then or they come back later, and so I was curious of how you handled that. I think it's great. There's no pressure for my kids to be involved in this. I just love the fact that they are, right?
Yeah.
And they can use it in any area of life. It doesn't have to be here.
Yeah, and we really, we were blessed because we really ran a very simple business back when we were doing it before Stephen and Claire came on board. But when COVID hit, then all of a sudden we were into shipping to home and all this stuff. And that was a whole new arena. And of course, nobody had perfected it at that point in time. It was all a new thing, you know. And so they kind of figured that out and everything. But I remember it was really stressful going through that. You know, we were shipping like, that first fall that we did ship to home, we were shipping out like, it was like 1,000 packages a day.
Wow.
You know, and trying to figure all that out and trying to keep track of all that on the computer and making it all work. It was pretty difficult.
Did you have employees?
We had some part-time employees, but other than that, we helped Stephen and Claire for the first few years. So there was Patty and I and Stephen and Claire, and otherwise just part-time employees,
Oh, wow.
seasonal employees. Yeah.
Well, you grew this thing pretty big just being in the family, huh? That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. But it was kind of, like I say, it was real challenging then, and so that used more of their skills and more abilities than how we had run it, you know,
Yeah.
because they were a lot better at it, you know. And of course, Patty and I were never really, we didn't grow up that much with computers per se, so therefore it was hard for us to transition to all that. Whereas Steve and Claire, they had, you know, they had grown up with that, so they were
A little easier to
a lot
click.
easier,
Yeah.
to adapt.
So this whole journey of owning this business, then it sounds like you branched out and done some other things, and you obviously learned a massive amount during running the business, which is natural, right? How did those skills help you with your other ventures as you went on now into retirement now? But you don't like to sit still very much, it seems like,
Right.
so you do all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, well, what happened was we finally got to the point, probably about I'd say the 10th year into our business, we were accumulating cash, and again, I grew up in a family in eastern Colorado. We grew up on a farm, and we were like dirt poor. And one of the things my dad, I'm so thankful that my dad taught me, was to always live very conservatively. And he taught me to save my money. And so we were saving our money. People would come to us like, why don't you buy an RV? Why don't you buy a boat? You know, and all this stuff. And we're like, no, you know, I mean, we can only use it a few months out of the year or whatever. And so we're like, no, we won't. And so we were thinking about, where do we put all this cash? And what was funny was we started getting into rental real estate. But I tell everybody, it's kind of like, it's almost like God tricked us into doing it. You know, He had the foresight to help us invest in real estate. We didn't have that courage. We didn't have that, and of course, we didn't know of anybody that did that. So, and all the stories we heard were the horror stories,
Yeah.
you know, about, oh yeah, well, we tried it, you know, and we couldn't make it work, you know, so we had to give it up. We lost all this money and everything else, you know, and so we weren't real adapt to it. But what happened was my sister, oldest sister, lived out in eastern Colorado. Her husband passed away. She moved to Denver to get a job, because she couldn't get a job out there, but she didn't have a place to live. And so she looked around, and she finally found this condo, but of course they had gone through medical expenses and all that, so she didn't have good credit. It's like, well, I found a condo, and I'd like to buy it, but I can't, you know. And so we finally came up with the idea. I was like, well, we'll buy it for you, because we had the money to do it at that point. We'll buy it for you, and then you just rent it from us.
Yeah.
You know, and at some point in time later on, you want to buy it from us, that's great, you know. But so we did that. Well, about 6 months later, she meets this guy on the internet in Dallas, a Christian dating site. And about a year later, all of a sudden she's like, "Well, I'm moving to Dallas." And we're like, "Wait a minute, this wasn't the plan." And so we're like, "So what are we going to do now?" And so we're like, "Okay, well, we'll figure it out." And so we ended up renting it out. And of course, that was by the Denver Tech Center. And it turned out easy to rent. We had to rent it like in less than a week.
Yeah.
And so it started from there. So we did that for a couple weeks or a couple years, and then all of a sudden we found another piece of property in that same complex. So we ended up buying it. And it was like a 2-year cycle to accumulate enough money to buy another property. And so we kept getting a little more confident and a little more confident. So we kept buying property, we finally had bought 4 condos and a 4-plex by the time that before we left Denver. And then we ended up, when we moved over to Montrose here to retire, before we actually retired, we ended up buying some other property in Montrose here. But we didn't realize, there were times when it was kind of tough. I think we were into like the 4th property, and we were still like, man, this is kind of tight as far as cash flow and all this,
Yeah.
And of course, we went through some not so good renters, and all that stuff, and learned a lot and everything. And there were times when it's like, well, I don't know if this is a good idea or not, But what happened was, again, my dad taught me to not be in debt more than you needed to be.
Right.
And so we finally got to the point, I think it was after we had bought the 4-plex, that we started paying the properties off, started paying the mortgages off. And that snowballed from then, because of course you pay the first one off, it's kind of difficult, but then you pay the second one off, it's twice as easy, and so forth.
Right.
So it keeps going. And but we look back now, that the income from those rental properties is a very significant part of our retirement income now, and gives us more than enough to do what we want to do and so forth. But again, if you look back at it, I didn't have that foresight, but God did,
Right.
and He led us, and I never dreamed it how good it would turn out. Yeah.
And you obviously started that whole rental journey with doing a favor for family, and then I'm assuming probably the mindset at that time was not turning that into an actual business. But then as you learned through 6, 10 properties, whatever it is, then did you start creating like running those rentals like a business, like getting everything separate? It's not just, were you hands-on with a lot of those properties of you having to go do the repairs and stuff like that, or?
Yeah, we started out that way. We don't do quite as much now. We still do a lot of hands-on.
Oh, okay.
But at the initial time, it was, we always felt it was easier for us to do it rather than try to find somebody to do it. We didn't have a list of really good, carpenters or plumbers or whatever to know to go to trust to do what we wanted to do. So we ended up doing some of that ourselves, and of course, what was beyond our skill level or whatever, then we had, ended up hiring it out or whatever. But we slowly, as each unit became vacant, if we'd had it for a while, then we started doing some remodeling and updating and all that kind of stuff. So we were always investing back into the properties.
Yeah. Are you still growing those now? Are you starting to sell them off with the market getting pretty high? Or are you just going to maintain these and keep playing this game as long as you can while it gives you guys the lifestyle you want?
We will keep on to them because of the way the taxes work, capital gains work. It's better for us to actually transfer those. The kids will inherit them, and they will have less capital gains to pay on them than if we sold them at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get to enjoy your life and the income and all that stuff.
Yeah. And I would guess a total time that we probably spend every year managing them and doing whatever we need to do if they have turnover or whatever. I don't know, we probably, if you added all that time together, we maybe work 2 months out of the year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds pretty rough.
Yeah, so it gives us plenty of time to do everything else.
Yeah. Yeah, you get to see family. It sounds like you got some grandkids now that you get to go spend some time with.
Yeah,
huh?
yeah, and that's precious. Yeah, because they grow really fast.
Yeah.
So we've enjoyed that. We own a farm out by where we live, and we lease out most of the farm, but still there's been always things to do. And again, I've always been a person, when I see something that's not good, I always want to improve it. So we had a royal going through there that was like really deep and erosive and so forth. And so we ended up, over the period of time that we had it, we ended up putting in 3 dams there that controlled what happened and made it, instead of this ugly scar on the landscape, it ended up being this beautiful grassy area. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah, so it turned out really neat. And I've always loved landscaping and stuff like that, so I'm always out in the yard doing something. Yeah, I really enjoy that.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing of everything is finding out what are your passions, because when you pursue your passions, you'll have joy in doing it. But if you're doing something that you have no passion for, it becomes a struggle.
Yeah.
And I was going to say, one of the things we did when we had a fundraising company, that I guess it came from the Lord, because I have no idea how I came up with it. But well, I do, because He had planted within me that I always wanted to help people. Okay, so every year we started out, if we were trying to grow the business, I'd always ask the Lord, help me to find customers that I can help. Okay, so I always approach from the standpoint of, I want to find customers I can help, because I know that if I help them and I help them become successful in their fundraiser, it's going to end up being successful for us, So it's always that win-win situation. So I never approach it from the standpoint of, who can I sell a fundraising program to? No, I always approach it from the standpoint of, who can I help? And because of that, again, because of that passion I had for helping people, it was easy for me to have the drive and initiative to get out there and find the customers. Yeah.
Did you ever have a hard time slowing down? And so from the grind to normal life, or was there ever a tough moment where it's like, for me, it was going from, 100 hours a week to 40. That was like very difficult. Did you ever have any moments like that?
We did. There were, again, the problem was we had a seasonal business, so when we worked. There was probably from like September 1st to the Thanksgiving, and maybe a little bit beyond there. I would guess we worked an average of probably a 10 to 12 hour day, and there were a lot of times when it was really busy, we were working weekends besides that, and you just kind of took that with the territory, realizing that in the summertime, we had all this time off. We probably worked less than 5 hours a day during the summer,
Right.
So there were trade-offs to that whole thing. But it was difficult to shut your mind down, especially during the busy season. And Patty can attest to that. She's a little bit better at turning it off, and so forth. But I was always like, here's an example. I remember one time we're like, so we're laying in bed, right? And we're just got done finishing stuff, and we're like trying to go to sleep, Well, of course, things are going through my mind about all the things I got to do tomorrow, I got to remember to do, And I was the type of person that I had to write it down, because I get so busy in the morning, get so distracted with one thing that I forget that I got to do this too,
Yeah.
And so I'd have to write it down, because I'm kind of a list to go by, And my backup was I always reminded Patty, oh Patty, you got to remind me that I got to do this, you know. So here we're sitting at 10 o'clock at night, you know. It's like I'm thinking about all these things. Patty, you got to remember, I got to do this in the morning. Oh Patty, remember, I've got to grab that in the morning, you know. And there was one night she got so frustrated. It's like I don't want to hear it anymore, you know. So again, it was that. It was a struggle, and I learned from then, you know, I got to turn it off, you know, I got to be able to let it go. And but it was difficult at times because my mind was always going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, you know, in couples, in that sense, it's usually one person has that ability to think all the time, and then the other person can shut it off. And,
yeah.
And you need both. Would you have it any other way than running a business with your wife, with Patty, or was it
Definitely.
totally worth it?
Oh, I loved it. Yeah. It was spending that time together that made. I mean, there were struggles.
Right.
No kidding. We had struggles in our marriage at times because we both let the struggles of the business, the stress of the business, end up creating a wedge. You know. And so there were times when we'd get grouchy at each other, you know. I'm sure you never did that.
Yeah, not me.
Yeah. And but anyway, we had to learn. We had to learn that you know, there were times when we had to come together, and we had to realize that we couldn't let the stress of the business influence our marriage.
Right.
And but I think overall, if you looked at it, it made our marriage very strong because we worked at it together. It wasn't a situation where she was going one place and I was going another place.
Right.
And then we'd meet, you know, in the evening. No, we were always working together. We were always communicating together. We were always talking on the phone, you know, whatever. And so I got to know, you know, and the neat thing about it is I got to know all of her strengths and all of her weaknesses, and she got to know all of mine, you know.
Yeah.
And so we knew how to capitalize, you know. It's like, what were we good at? You know, what was I good at and what was she good at? And we divided up the responsibility of the business accordingly. You know, I've never been an office person. I'm terrible. You have to literally tie me to the chair if I spend more than 3 hours in an office, you know.
Yeah.
Because I'm such an outside person and have to always be on my feet doing something. And but she's the other way around. She's great at office stuff, you know. So she ended up doing all the office stuff, and I ended up doing all that.
That's why when I started coming into the office, I got that pull-up bar right there, just because sitting for too long and like I'm going nuts, I gotta do something, and then, you know, calms you down a little bit, and then you back to office work.
Yeah, and there was always a certain amount I had to do, especially when it was back before we even started sending emails. I had to sit down and call customers, you know, for next year's business and stuff like that. And so what I would end up doing is I'd set a reward for myself. It's like, okay, if you spend 4 hours doing this in the morning, then you can take the afternoon off and do whatever you want.
Right.
You know, and I literally had to do that, but it was a way of rewarding myself, so I had the motivation to do it.
Yeah. I'm getting better at that as we come out of this. It's still a grind season, but as we come out of it, there's ways I try to reward myself, because I've noticed too, it's like, oh man, I don't want to do that. You know, don't make me dive back into this computer work, you know.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
and it was, you know, we always looked at, you know, we always kind of, in some ways, you know, regretted going into the busy season because we knew what it was going to take every year. But at the same time, we also had come from a period where we had basically taken the summer off. So, so we knew the rewards to each side, you know. Yeah, you're going to have to put some work in, but, you know, you're also going to be able to take some time off.
Yeah.
You know, and we were thankful that we got to take multiple vacations, international stuff, whatever with the kids. So that was part of our reward too of working hard.
Yeah, that's been absolutely fantastic, Alan. We're kind of coming to the end here of this whole podcast. One final question: if you were to You meet a kid, it doesn't matter age, let's go, 22, 24 years old. You meet a young man and he wants to start a company and he's not sure how to do it. What's one piece of advice over your 40 years of business experience here that you would give to him, in comparison to whether it's the grind, don't compare yourself to others, or what's one piece? He's just like, hey, I'm looking to start off into this. What would you tell him?
One of the things that I guess that, again, it comes back to passion, is I would make sure that he's doing something that he has a passion for.
He knows his why.
Yeah. Because otherwise, if he goes into a business that he doesn't have a passion for, he's going to find out he burns out easy.
Yeah.
Whereas if you have a passion for it, then it's going to motivate you more. The other thing that I would encourage everyone is take on a partner. And when I say take on a partner, take on God as your partner.
Yeah.
Because when I got to the point where I understood that, and I literally did that, not only understood it, but put it into practice, it made things so much easier. Because you're dealing with a person that has infinite intelligence, infinite wisdom, can see into the future, all that, and a person that cares so much for you that he'll lead and guide you. He doesn't have any interest in leading you astray, and that's the best part of you can have.
Right. No, that's wise words. I like it. All right, guys, thanks for checking out the Unrivaled Potential podcast. We'll see you next week. Go ahead and find us on YouTube and Spotify, Pandora, Apple Music, and we'll see you guys next week. Thanks.